My son abandoned me in a foreign country with no money, no passport, and no way home. He thought it would be the end of me, that I'd vanish quietly so he could take my house for himself. But he forgot one thing. I'm not the kind of mother who disappears. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. The moment is burned into my memory like a scar. We were at the Puerto Vallarta airport, waiting for our connecting flight to Seattle. Rodney, my only son, and his wife Clara were sitting beside me, whispering like two conspirators. When I asked what was wrong, Rodney smiled too quickly and said, "Nothing, Mom, just tired." That smile should have warned me it was hollow, polite, and full of secrets. 20 minutes before boarding, he pressed a crisp $20 bill into my hand. "Mom, can you grab some water and snacks? You know what we all like." I stood up, ready to go with them. But he shook his head. "No, you go. I need to make a call, and Cora needs the restroom." He even kissed my cheek, cold and formal, like a goodbye he couldn't say out loud. I went to the small shop near Gate 17, picked out his favorite Blue Label water, trail mix for Cora, protein bars for myself. The checkout line was long. 2 crying children and a stroller blocked the way. 12 minutes passed, maybe 14. When I came back, the seats were empty. Their jackets, bags, everything gone. At first I told myself they'd just moved to another gate, but when I checked, no one had seen them. Then came the sentence that froze me. Evan's party? They took the earlier flight to Denver. The woman at the counter said it so casually, not knowing she'd just shattered my world. Denver, not Seattle. My son had left me behind on purpose. I opened my backpack. My passport pocket was empty. My phone, my wallet, gone. Only the $20 bill remained in my hand, the same one he'd given me moments before. It was like an insult printed on paper. I sat there, trembling, surrounded by strangers who had futures waiting for them. Mine had been stolen in an instant. I thought of all the times I had held Rodney's hand when he was little, teaching him to walk, to speak, to believe the world was kind. The loudspeaker called another boarding group. I just sat there, gripping that $20, feeling its edges cut into my palm, and realized something. I could either crumble right there in that terminal, or I could fight my way home. And I chose to fight. I stood in that airport, frozen for a long time, feeling like the floor beneath me had vanished. My son, my own blood, had erased me as easily as closing a door. For a moment, I couldn't even cry. The pain was too sharp for tears. Then something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to die in that airport. Not here. Not like this. The security officer at the desk had kind eyes. When I told her my son had taken my passport and wallet, she didn't laugh or doubt me. She gave me a form, a phone number, and a direction: the U.S. Consular Agency, downtown. I walked there under the heavy afternoon sun, my empty backpack swinging against my shoulder, my $20 folded tight in my hand like a promise I refused to break. The agency was a small, clean office with an American flag on the wall. A woman behind the desk looked up as I entered. "Tell me what happened, Mrs. Evans." Her voice was steady, professional, but her eyes softened as I spoke. Her name was Patricia Henderson. I told her everything: the trip, the whispers, the $20, the vanished flight. When I finished, She set down her pen. "We can issue an emergency passport," she said. "But it takes 3 business days and a police report. The fee is $135. I emptied my pockets. $8 left after the snacks. Some coins. A crumpled receipt. That was all. Patricia looked at me quietly for a moment. Then she stood, disappeared into the back room, and returned with an envelope. "The Emergency Assistance Fund will cover it," she said. "You'll pay it back later." She handed me a form and smiled faintly. "You're not broken. You're angry. Angry people find their way home." Her words hit me harder than anything my son had done. Because she was right. I wasn't broken. I was furious. Fury was energy, and energy was life. She helped me find a cheap hostel near the pier, $15 a night, clean and safe. The young clerk there didn't ask questions. In the shared kitchen, travelers laughed over beer and stories. I sat silently at a small table, tracing my plan on a napkin like a battle map. Step 1, identification. Step 2, money. Step 3, home. The next morning, I woke to the sound of gulls and traffic and realized something simple but powerful. My son had stolen my things, but not my will. He underestimated the woman who raised him, and that was his first mistake. By sunrise, I was already on the street, the forms Patricia gave me folded neatly inside my jacket. The air smelled of salt and exhaust, the kind that clings to your clothes and your thoughts. I walked to the police station, rehearsing my story. It sounded absurd, even to my own ears. My son stole my passport, my wallet, and left me in Mexico. But the officer behind the glass window only nodded slowly, as if he had heard far worse. He stamped the report, signed it, and handed me a copy. I left the station clutching that paper like it was gold. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was proof that I still existed. Back at the hostel, I spent the afternoon writing everything down. The time, the gate number, the amount of money, the last words Rodney said to me. Every detail mattered. The habit came from my years as a businesswoman. When life falls apart, documentation is power. That night, I borrowed a fellow traveler's phone to check flights to Seattle. A one-way ticket cost $420. I had nothing, but the number burned into my mind like a goal. Patricia said my emergency passport would be ready in 3 days. 3 days to find strength, not money strength. On the second day, I walked through the market streets, looking at silver trinkets and fruit stalls, pretending I was just another tourist. But my eyes kept drifting toward the sky. Planes climbed through the clouds, their bellies flashing in the sunlight. Somewhere up there, my son was on his way to my house, convinced his mother was gone. He thought he had time to move my belongings, time to claim my property, but he forgot who raised him. I was the one who taught him how to plan, how to anticipate, how to strike when no one expects it. And now, I would use those lessons against him. On the third morning, Patricia handed me my new passport temporary. Thin, but shining, like redemption. She also gave me an envelope with $600 from the emergency fund. "Pay it back when you can," she said. I promised I would. That night, I sat in my bunk, listening to the hum of ceiling fans and distant laughter. I could already see Seattle in my mind. The pale blue house, the garden I planted with my husband, the place my son now thought was his. Tomorrow, I would fly home. Tomorrow, the hunter would become the hunted. The morning air was thick and bright when I boarded the plane to Seattle. My hands trembled as I clutched my emergency passport and the ticket I had bought with Patricia's help. Middle seat, economy. Between a crying baby and a teenager lost in his headphones. I didn't care. I was going home. Every vibration of the engine felt like a heartbeat dragging me closer to justice. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the small oval window and saw the coastline shrinking below. That was the place my son had abandoned me. I whispered softly to myself, not as a curse, but as a promise. You thought I would stay lost. You were wrong. The flight was long, 4 hours that felt like years. When the wheels touched the Seattle runway, I felt something inside me click back into place. My city, my language, my fight. I passed through customs easily, emergency passport, case number, official stamp. I was legitimate again. I ordered a ride share, sitting silently in the back seat while the driver hummed along to the radio. When we turned onto my street, my chest tightened. There it was, my pale blue house with white trim, the one my husband and I bought 30 years ago. The porch I painted myself, the rose garden that had survived every winter, but something was wrong. The curtains were drawn. The driveway was empty. My son's car wasn't there. The curtains. I paid the driver, thanked her, and stood on the sidewalk staring at the house that suddenly felt both mine and foreign. Mary, you're back early. The voice startled me. Daniel, my neighbor, stood on his porch, cardigan buttoned up despite the mild air. He had been my neighbor for 12 years, the kind of man who noticed everything but never gossiped. I told him my trip had been cut short. His brow furrowed. Strange, he said. Rodney and Cora left 2 days ago, boxes and all. I thought you were moving. Boxes. My stomach dropped. Did you see what they took? He hesitated, then nodded. Furniture, maybe valuables. I thanked him, retrieved the spare key hidden under the rhododendron bush, and unlocked my own front door. The house smelled stale, untouched. I moved from room to room, heart pounding. Empty spaces everywhere. The grandfather clock gone. My jewelry box open and bare. My late husband's watch missing. And then I saw it on my desk, perfectly centered, a manila folder. Inside, a document stamped and notarized. Deed of gift. Property transferred from Mary Evans to Rodney Evans. My own signature at the bottom. My legs nearly gave out. That's when I realized he hadn't just left me behind. He'd stolen my life. I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at that cursed document. My name, my signature, my house, all taken by deceit. The paper was smooth, heavy, official, but it felt like poison in my hands. My son had not only abandoned me in Mexico, he had done it after forging my trust into a weapon. I could almost hear his voice from weeks earlier, gentle and convincing. Mom, let's update your medical directive, just in case anything happens. He had brought his laptop to the kitchen table, scrolling through pages of legal text while I stirred soup on the stove. He told me it was standard, a health document to protect my interests. I hadn't read it closely. My eyes weren't as sharp as they used to be. He turned the screen toward me, guided my hand to sign on a small digital pad, and smiled. I never thought to ask for a copy. Now I knew what I'd really signed. The anger that rose in me was cold, steady, and sharp. Not the wild kind that screams, but the kind that plans. I picked up my phone, the old landline still plugged in, and called the bank. My accounts were untouched. That was one mercy. Then I dialed Daniel's number and asked if I could borrow his laptop. Within an hour, I was searching for a real estate attorney. That's how I found Margaret Chen. Her office answered on the second ring. When I told the receptionist my son had stolen my home using a fraudulent deed, she hesitated, then transferred me immediately. A calm voice came on the line. "This is Margaret. Tell me everything. Everything." I gave her the short version: Mexico, the missing passport, the forged signature. She asked just 3 questions. Was the document notarized? Yes. Was the signature yours? Yes. Did you know what you were signing? No. She paused, then said, "Come in tomorrow morning. Bring the deed and any identification you have. I'll clear my schedule." That night, I barely slept. I changed every lock in the house, called a locksmith who didn't ask questions. By midnight, I had 3 new sets of keys and 1 plan. The next day, I would start the fight to take back my home. Before I went to bed, I placed the deed on the kitchen table beside a candle. I whispered into the dark, "You wanted everything, Rodney. But you've only awakened the woman who built it." Trek. Then I blew out the flame. The locksmith arrived early the next morning, a quiet man named Frank. He worked quickly, replacing every bolt and cylinder while I stood watch by the door. When he finished, he handed me 3 new keys. "These locks are pick-resistant," he said. "Nobody's getting in without these." I nodded and paid him in cash. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of safety. At 11, I met with Margaret Chen in her downtown office, a tall glass building overlooking the gray water of Puget Sound. She was precise and calm, with dark hair streaked with silver. The kind of woman who didn't waste a single movement. I handed her the folder, the emergency passport, and my written notes. She read silently, her pen flying across a yellow pad. "This is a properly executed deed," she finally said, tapping the paper. "But if you can prove you were deceived about what you were signing, we can file to invalidate it under fraud and undue influence." She leaned back and looked me straight in the eyes. "It won't be easy, but I've won harder cases." I felt my heartbeat steady. "I'm not walking away," I said. She nodded once. "Good. Then, we start today." By afternoon, she had drafted the first motion and told me what to expect. Court filings, a police report about the stolen items, a formal complaint for fraud. It was a mountain of paperwork, but I climbed it without hesitation. Every document I signed felt like a step toward reclaiming my name. That night, I cooked myself a small dinner, just soup and bread, and sat by the window, watching the rain blur the garden outside. My house was quiet, but the silence no longer scared me. It was the silence before a storm I was ready to unleash. 2 days later, I heard the sound I'd been waiting for. The slam of a car door, the faint murmur of voices. I peeked through the curtain. Rodney's silver car sat in the driveway. Cora stood beside him, pointing at the door, confused. I stayed still, listening to the metallic scrape of a key, trying and failing to turn in the lock. Once, twice, harder, nothing. They circled to the back door. Another try, another failure, then silence. Finally, my phone rang an unknown number. I answered. "Mom, is that you?" Rodney's voice trembled. "It is," I said. "I'm home, and your keys don't work anymore." "I'm home. I have 2. I have too. The line went quiet. Then I added softly, we need to talk. I opened the door just enough for the daylight to fall between us, not enough to invite them in. Rodney stood there, thinner than before, his shirt wrinkled from travel. Cora lingered behind him, her eyes sharp, scanning for weakness. My heart was pounding, but my voice was calm. Oh, I said quietly. You're back. That was faster than I expected. Rodney tried to smile, that same strained smile he used at the airport. What happened to you? We looked everywhere. I raised my hand to stop his performance. You left me in Mexico with nothing. My passport, my wallet, my phone, all gone. You took them. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. What are you talking about? There must be some mistake. Cora stepped forward, her tone sweet but cutting. Mary, maybe you misplaced them. It's easy to get confused when you travel. That word confused hit me like a slap. I stepped aside just enough for them to see the coffee table behind me. On it lay a neat stack of papers. The motion to invalidate the deed, the police reports, photographs of missing items. I have something to show you, I said. I picked up the top page and held it out where they could read the bold header. Motion to invalidate deed of gift based on fraud. Rodney's face drained of color. What is this? It's the truth, I replied. The document you told me was a medical directive. It was a property transfer. You stole my house. Cora's fingers tightened around Rodney's arm. We need a lawyer, she whispered, but I heard her clearly. Rodney straightened, his voice rising. That deed is legal. My lawyer already reviewed it. You signed it willingly. Go ahead, I said calmly. Call the police. I already did. Case number 74821. Theft in Mexico. Stolen property from this address. Witness statement from Daniel next door. Every word is documented. He hesitated, the phone heavy in his hand. You reported me? You reported me. I reported theft, I said evenly. And I'm recording this conversation. Everything you say now is evidence. Cora tugged his arm, whispering frantically. They backed away down the steps, retreating to the car. Rodney glared at me. This isn't over. No, I said. It's just beginning. The new lock clicked shut behind me as I turned the key. The echo of metal sliding into place felt like reclaiming my heartbeat. For the first time in weeks, this house was mine. Again, not by paper, but by will. The morning after the confrontation, the house was eerily quiet. I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the manila folder filled with everything Margaret had prepared. It was no longer just a family dispute. It was a war built on paper and lies. Margaret called at 9. He's hired an attorney, she said. Robert Michaels. He's known for turning family theft into misunderstandings. Expect him to twist every fact. I smiled grimly. Then, we'll give him facts he can't twist. It is that was Mound. Over the next weeks, my life became a cycle of signatures, affidavits, and court filings. Margaret and her assistant guided me through every step. They told me Rodney's side had filed a counter motion, claiming I was mentally unfit and had gifted the property voluntarily. Their argument was that I had regretted the decision after a family falling out. It was humiliating, my own son calling me unstable, but I had learned to channel humiliation into fuel. Margaret ordered a psychological evaluation to demolish their claim. The doctor asked me to recall dates, solve puzzles, retell memories. When it was over, she smiled faintly. "You're sharper than most people half your age." Her report came back clean, no cognitive decline, no confusion, just determination. Meanwhile, Margaret's investigator, Sarah, uncovered the truth that turned the tide. Rodney was drowning in debt, nearly $50,000 across credit cards. He had emailed real estate agents before our vacation, asking for valuations of my house. The subject lines were all the same: property evaluation request. He'd even searched online, "How to convince a parent to transfer property," and "What happens if someone abandons an elderly person abroad?" When Margaret showed me the printed search history, I couldn't breathe for a moment. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It had timestamps. The first hearing arrived like a storm. The courtroom was sterile, the air dry and heavy. I sat beside Margaret, while Rodney and Cora sat across the aisle, their lawyer confident and cold. Michaels opened with a smooth voice. "This is not a case of fraud. It's a case of regret. A mother signed her house over to her son, then changed her mind." Margaret stood. Her voice was calm, but sharp as glass. "The evidence will show otherwise. The deed was executed under false pretenses. The defendant concealed its true purpose and abandoned his mother in another country to secure control of her property." I was called to testify. My hands trembled as I took the stand, but my voice did not. I told the judge everything from the whispering at the gate to the $20 bill still folded in my purse. Michaels tried to interrupt, but Judge Morrison held up a hand. "Let her finish." By the time I stepped down, Rodney wouldn't look at me. His lawyer spoke of family misunderstandings and emotional overreactions. But Margaret's closing words cut through everything. "Your Honor," she said, "this is not regret. It is survival." And for the first time, I felt the tide turning back toward me. The hearing dragged on for weeks, each session a battlefield of paperwork and strategy. Rodney avoided my eyes whenever we were in the same room. Cora, who had once smiled so sweetly, now sat stone-faced beside him, her fingers digging into her purse straps like she could squeeze courage out of them. Margaret fought like a general, methodical, calm, stating. She presented the emails to realtors, the credit card statements, the screenshots of his online searches, and finally, the testimony from the notary himself. Frank Morrison looked nervous on the stand, his voice unsteady. "He paid me $300 in cash," he admitted. "Told me his mother was too ill to come to my office, so we met at a Starbucks. I didn't ask questions. I just notarized the papers." The courtroom fell silent. $300 was 12 times the standard fee. The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you believed she was too ill?" Frank swallowed hard. "No, Your Honor. She walked in fine. I should have known better." That moment sealed it. I saw the shift in the judge's expression, the subtle acknowledgement that truth had finally pierced through the fog of excuses. Rodney took the stand next, his lawyer hovering like a vulture. "My mother wanted me to have the house," he said. "She told me it was time to plan for the future. I didn't deceive her." "Thank you, Sode." Margaret's cross-examination was brutal. "Did you tell the notary your mother had mobility issues?" Rodney hesitated. "I may have said something like that." Yes or no?" "Yes." "Did your mother, in fact, have mobility issues?" "No." "Did you tell her she was signing a medical directive?" "I said it was related to her health." Margaret leaned in slightly. So, you lied. Rodney's face flushed red. He didn't answer. The silence said, enough. The judge called a recess. 10 minutes later, Margaret received a phone call and hurried to the bench. When she returned, her eyes gleamed. "Police found your missing items," she whispered. "Everything, your watch, your camera, the silver service, all in a storage unit rented under Rodney's name." When the court reconvened, the judge's tone was final. "The evidence presented demonstrates intentional fraud, misrepresentation, and theft. The deed of gift is hereby declared null and void. Legal ownership of the property returns to the plaintiff, Mrs. Mary Evans." My knees nearly gave out. I gripped Margaret's arm as the gavel fell. The courtroom noise faded until all I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat, slow and steady, like a clock finally repaired. After months of humiliation, fear, and sleepless nights, I had won back my home. But as I looked across the aisle at the broken figure of my son, I realized something painful. Justice doesn't erase love. It only shows how far love can be betrayed. When I left the courthouse that day, the air felt cleaner than it had in months. I stood on the steps for a long while, watching the traffic move below, people hurrying to their lives with phones in their hands and peace in their hearts. I had my house, my name, and my dignity back, but peace would take time. 2 days later, I went to the Seattle Police Evidence Facility to collect my belongings. The officer brought out a clear plastic bin labeled with my case number. Inside were the pieces of my past. My late husband's Omega watch, its glass scratched but still ticking. The old Leica camera I used to capture family birthdays, and the silver service that had belonged to my mother. Each item had been wrapped in evidence bags, dull from dust, but waiting to shine again. At home, I placed them carefully on the table and began to clean them one by one. The watch came first. I wound it gently until I heard that soft mechanical heartbeat. The camera still clicked perfectly. And when the silver began to gleam under the cloth, I felt something strange, a quiet forgiveness for myself. I had blamed my age, my trust, my blindness, but the truth was simpler. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. A week later, Margaret visited with the final paperwork. "It's over," she said. "The judge's order is permanent. Rodney and Clara are also liable for $15,000 in damages, though I doubt they can pay." I smiled faintly. "I don't need the money. The lesson was expensive enough." The lesson was expensive enough. Months passed. One warm evening in August, I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea and watched a moving truck pull up to the apartment complex across the street. My heart tightened when I saw Rodney loading boxes, his shoulders slumped, Cora directing impatiently. They had been evicted. Daniel, my neighbor, came to stand beside me. "That's them, isn't it?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Yes, my son. They were as the mind. Do you feel any better seeing this?" I looked down at the silver bracelet on my wrist, the one I'd cleaned that day, and shook my head. "No, winning doesn't bring joy. It brings balance." When the truck pulled away, I whispered a prayer not for vengeance, but for clarity. Betrayal had cost me money, sleep, and nearly my sanity. But it had also given me something I didn't expect: wisdom. I learned that love without respect becomes weakness, and trust without boundaries becomes a weapon turned against you. As the sun sank behind the hills, I locked my front door, the same door I had fought to keep, and let the house fall into its quiet rhythm. The watch on my wrist ticked steadily, a reminder that time, truth, and dignity always outlast deceit. If you've listened to my story, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you forgive, or would you fight for what's rightfully yours? Either way, remember this: survival is not cruelty, it's courage.